You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of ArchaeoAnimals, the podcast all about zooarchaeology. And now for this particular episode, we were going to celebrate the fact that we've hit 50 episodes. Except that was last month.
I mean, we never said we were good at counting or maths.
Or at introducing ourselves. By the way, I'm Simona and with me.
And yes, it would also me, Alex Fitzpatrick. You know, we're keeping it fresh and funky by changing up our intro at episode 51.
Keeping you on your toes.
Yeah.
We were going to celebrate our 50 episodes with a bit of a light-hearted one, where I guess we'll offer some of our hottest takes.
Which we've never done before, to be fair.
No, especially not you.
No, I've never given a take in my life, to be honest.
It's been 0 days since the last take was given.
Ooh, yeah, probably. But yeah, we will be giving our hot takes, which again, we've never done before. We've never been opinionated on this podcast. But we'll be listing our top 10 animal bones, which obviously sounds a lot easier than it actually was in retrospect.
Yeah, we'll also give out some of our least favourite animal bones.
Which we've never talked about on this show either, so people will be very surprised.
Well, I guess in this particular episode we'll be slightly more specific than, like, I hated this entire order of animals for no particular reason.
I mean, you know, speak for yourself, to be honest. But yeah, so I guess we'll start off by talking about, so, you know, we did our top 10 lists the way that I think most people do top 10 lists. So we'll start off from the bottom of our 10 and we'll work our way up to number 1. So, you know, we'll let that anticipation build and whatnot. And then during our next segment, we'll go a bit down the other road and talk about our top, or it's not really top amazing. 3, is it?
You get
it's our worst animal bones.
Bottom 3?
Well done.
Bottom, just the worst. They're the worst animal bones. We don't need to number them because they're just sitting in the bottom of the pile anyway.
Yeah, and I guess then in part 3 we'll reveal our 5 top animal bones.
Very exciting stuff. Very hard-hitting journalism going on here.
I'm trying to do a drum roll, but you see I'm doing a slight drum roll on Bastet, and it's the sound's not quite carrying as it should.
She needs to be thicker or more hollow. I don't know how sound works.
But she's purring, so she's happy enough.
Okay. I guess we should get started then.
Okay, so for number 10, my personal pick, and this was harder, like, I need to stress, like, it was harder than I thought it would be. But, like, just, top 10 animal bones. But you actually have to sit down and think about it. Say, but do I like this bone more than that bone? And then you try, I think I'll go for this bone. Oh, no, Alex already put it down. Oh, But yeah, no, I guess for my number 10, I would go for tibias. No particular species, just the tibia. Because a lot of animal bones are usually, when they come to us a couple thousand years later, they tend to be a little bit more on the fragmented side. And you tend to sometimes only have one of the epiphyses, or no epiphysis at all. Or even worse still, it's juvenile and is completely unfused. However, with our beloved, reliable tibia and its nice triangular shape, it stands out beautifully. So even if you get like a thing that's like an inch long, you're like, oh yeah, no, that's a tibia. I mean, what of? I do not know, but that's a tibia.
It's solid, it's stable, it's dependable. I mean, what more can you want from the tibia? I mean, to be completely honest, I do agree
the pun.
What?
The pun the terrible pun you missed with to be honest.
Oh god. We gotta start the episode over. Dude.
It's all I ever wanted.
I hate this podcast. I hate this so much. We haven't even started, really. Anyway, getting it back to very important stuff. But I do agree, because when it comes to IDing bones, obviously, there's some stuff that are very easy to see, skulls and whatnot. Just like, I know what that is. But when it comes to the long bones, I think the tibia is probably the most characteristic, even in a fragmented form, because like you said, that triangle bit is just chef's kiss. Great design. Love to see it. It's just good. It's just good stuff.
And just to keep it on the super serious side, what is your number 10?
Listen, I don't know if we've talked about this on the show, so part of me was like, we need to talk about it, because it's a very serious and important conversation that needs to be had, and needs to be done delicately with the kind of professionalism and sensitivity that people need for these kind of topics. And on the other hand, I do actually enjoy them in a way that is similar to a lover of art looking at a modern artist. And it's called the baculum, folks. Now, the baculum is a very interesting bone. We, as humans, do not have them. And I'm trying to figure out the best way to phrase this, but it's the penis bone. It's the bone that supports the penis. So
Don't think there's many other ways you can put it.
Yeah, I guess not. Like I said, humans do not have one, but many mammals do. And, I have seen my fair share of them, and they're removing the uses of the bone itself, what it's intended to do, and the kind of jokes that a more juvenile person may make about them. They're actually kind of interesting looking. So obviously they are very different depending on what animal you're dealing with. And as someone who has seen bacula from foxes to seals, boy, does that diversity really get reflected in bone. My gosh.
What sort of brings them all together is that, much like our tibia friend, you can't miss them.
You can't. No, pretty easy.
Also super, super rare, so.
Yeah, so it's kind of exciting to come across them. So yeah, sometimes a bit more difficult in that case to identify them to species, because they're, they can be kind of rare, and I feel like a lot of reference collections don't always have them. But some people like me who are, very thorough in our collecting do have, say, a couple of different dog breed ones that someone sent them. So if anyone ever needs a reference, just let me know.
Yeah,
Moving on.
Well, context Alex for all your baculum reference needs.
I have no idea what they put, but boy, did it get to my house. Well, no one else would probably know what it is. I mean, I've talked about baculum to people in archaeology who aren't zooarchaeologists, and they've just never known. And it's kind of fun to talk about it like that, because in the back of my head, I'm just like, I'm talking about a penis bone. I have a PhD. It's fine.
Right, for number 9. For myself, I have gone for boar tusks, for no particular reason other than they look pretty.
They are very pretty. And they've got very distinctive, like, rectangular base that I would kind of appreciate. If that's very strange to say, but...
Yeah, I guess there's also, correct me if I'm wrong, the male tusks, there doesn't tend to be a root because they continuously grow throughout their lifetime.
Yeah, which is very cool. But no, they're very pretty, and obviously they're used often in decorative and ornamental type of artifacts, and sometimes in ritual type things. So, mark that down on your bingo for this podcast. But they're very cool. I didn't even think about those, and now I kind of wish I put them on one of my lists. But yeah, I guess I will go at my number 9, which is just a simple rabbit femur. There's a bit of a theme in my list. And obviously, for listeners at home, we encourage you to maybe pull up Google Images and look these up. I don't know. Maybe we'll figure out a way to kind of just collect a lot of these images and put them in on Twitter, maybe. But yeah, the rabbit femur is this very nice and kind of like curvy looking type of bone. It always reminds me of like a claw in some way. But you'll notice this in my list. The kind of bones I like are very interesting looking and curvy, and it has nothing to do with like actual use. It's more of a aesthetic judgment.
It's like we've both gone for aesthetic in this number 9.
True.
For 8, again, I guess much like the tibia, is not a bone that I particularly like per se, but it's just one that tends to aid identification, so to speak. And my random choice is an amphibian ilium.
Yeah, I actually never seen what an amphibian ilium really looked like, because I don't really work with amphibians, so I'm glad you put that.
Well, it just looks, of course, it has sort of the articulation. They'll go into the femur, and then it's almost like a rib-like thing that sticks out of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's my professional description of it. And again, because amphibians are notoriously annoying to ID to species, unless, of course, you're very experienced or like you specialize in amphibians. A lot of stuff tend to go down as like either frog or toad, because with some bones you just can't tell. The ilium, though, if you have a complete enough, is one of the ones that tends to be a little bit easier to ascertain whether it's frog or toad. So it just gives you a bit of a win with amphibians. It's a win.
So the theme of our lists are either aesthetically pleasing or it makes our lives way easier. That's fair, I think.
You get a nice complete ilium and you're like, oh yeah, I know this one. That's a frog. I'm so smart.
That's all we want. We just want that validation, really. Speaking of validation, I guess this is more to validate my PhD work. But my number 8 is the great auk humerus, which, I mean, bird humeruses are actually, as much as I like to complain about bird bones for being small and fragile and annoying, the humerus I find very aesthetically pleasing. They're very bulbous and kind of round and just very interesting looking. And the great auk in particular, the great auk bones are very distinctive in that they're very curvy. And I think a lot of the kind of like puffin type of that family of bird have very similar bones, and they're up to the point where I think they curve almost like an S shape, which is extremely fascinating to look at. But obviously I've got a great affection for the great auk since working with a lot of their bones during my PhD. I even have, for those of you who don't follow me on social media, I have a great auk tattoo because they are very cute, if not extremely depressing to think about. And which is like me, I am also very cute, but extremely depressing to think about. So, you know, a lot of kindred spirits, basically. So I felt like I had to put them on this list for sure.
Okay. I mean, I can't comment to that. I was more focusing on trying to remember how to count.
Yeah, I was struggling. I was struggling with that too, don't worry.
My number 7 is also a bird bone. I guess it would be like avian in general. Mm-hmm. It's a bone that I particularly like, but again, doesn't particularly necessarily aid you with identification. I guess it does just birds, I don't know. Anywho, it's the bird tarso-metatarsus, which sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but I guess it'll be the equivalent of our metapodials. And the reason I like it is I particularly like the distal end of it. I find it aesthetically pleasing for some reason. It just looks like it's got tons of little prongs.
Yeah, I get what you mean. It is. There's a lot of bird bones that are really aesthetically pleasing, even if they are very annoying.
Yeah, because I mean, like, I guess, like, though, if you get a complete tarso-metatarsus, like, you can identify it to species, but I think with birds, we have such a wide variety of species, many of which are wild. Is it unless you've got access to sort of a museum that has an extensive reference collection, nay. But other than that, not really like it. And of course, depending on the bird species, you can get a spur to the side of it. So you get that in roosters.
Yeah.
You get sort of that little spur on the side of it, and sometimes it's like really chunky.
It's very exciting too, to be honest, when you get a spur. But yeah, I will go to my number, 7?
Yes.
And a dog Calcanus, which is just, it makes me laugh because it looks like a little shoe. And like, I guess that's helpful in terms of kind of figuring out spatially where the calcanus is. Like, not necessarily, it's not the foot bone per se, but it's in that area.
In the general region.
Yeah, and they look like little shoes, and I think that's fun.
Yeah, I guess I mean like the canid one in general, because the wolf is, to be fair, I wouldn't be able to tell the two apart.
Yeah, it's a bit. Yeah.
That one's really big, but then certain dogs are really big, so.
Yeah, that's always a pain.
Okay, but we have somehow made it to number 6. I shall keep this brief. Again, any species, no particular taxon. Scapulars. Well, from an ID point of view, they tend to be a pain, because if you get like a small fragment of it, because of course the scapula itself, it is quite thin, so it does fragment a fair bit, and then you get like a scapula that's smashed into like 56 bits, and you just like question why you're doing this. But what I do like scapulars for is any modification that might have taken place on the bone. So sometimes you can find perforations of it, so where people would have hung them up to say like smoke them or salt them, or sort of burning, as you find in a lot of sort of pyromancy practices. So that's what does the scapula for me.
No, that they are very cool, but yeah, if they're fragmented, I'm just going to start putting down unidentifiable. Anyway, my final one for this bit, at least, number 6, are deer frontlets, which is kind of cheating, I think, because it's not really a bone per se. It's a part of the skull, kind of the frontal area of the cranium plus the bit that where the antlers usually come from. And again, it's more of an aesthetic thing. We talked about it in a previous episode. We talked about Star Car and the fabulous deer frontlets that they have from that site. I've had deer frontlets from my site, from my PhD. They're just extremely cool, and there's so much interesting things that could have been used with regards to ritual or costuming and things like that. They're cool. It's a cool look. No wonder why they're still very popular as hunting trophies to this day. But yeah, we sped through that pretty good, and I think we can take a break, and then we can get into the real juicy stuff, which is the worst bones on the planet. So yeah, see you later.
And we're back with part 2 of this episode of ArchaeoAnimals, where we rank our favorite animal bones.
Except not this time, because we will be ranking down our least favorite animal bones. I really don't know what the proper terminology or phraseology is for this, but these are just the worst, right?
It's the rock bottom, the bone bottom, the I cannot even bones.
Yeah, I mean, unsurprisingly, I feel like we may have talked a bit about these kind of bones in the past.
Maybe once or twice.
Yeah.
Don't be too hard on yourself.
But yeah, I mean, we're both professionals, so this is obviously professional opinions and should be taken not with a grain of salt, but with the, kind of reverence and respect that you would, any other kind of work of art.
Yeah, just the respect that our gravitas commands.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll make a start again. Number 3, least favourite animal bone, are horse teeth. So now, while in general I do really like teeth, because of course, they're very easy to identify to species or to what tooth you have, even if it's partial, you can normally work it out. And horse teeth per se, they are aesthetically pleasing enough, and they're quite, you can't miss them. So very cuboid in shape and just very long, so you can't miss a horse tooth. However, say you've got a whole mandible and you want to age it. the way you age a horse mandible doesn't quite work the same way, like so some of the mandibular wear stages you have for, say, sheep and cattle. It's just so much faff, and I just cannot even.
That's fair.
And also, of course, if you do get loose teeth, I mean, of course, again, I'm speaking from someone who's quite early careers. So, of course, many people probably disagree with me, but just they mostly all look the same.
No, you're right.
Like, okay, you have your mandibular, you have your maxillary, okay? That far, that's fine. But in terms of, is it a fourth premolar or a first molar? I don't know.
No, you're right, and you should say it.
Just equus caballus, mandibular tooth.
It's that thing where, like, again, I'm similarly very early career still. I know this is something you learn with age, but there's sometimes where I see people who are like so specific about their identifications where I'm like, no, you can't do that. That's not a real thing you just did. No one can do that. Maybe I'm just not good at zooarchaeology.
No. I'm sorry, I cannot tell you. Oh, this is a horse fourth premolar. It erupted on a full moon on a Wednesday. Be like, oh, what's a Wednesday? Spoiler.
I mean, I know you could do that. I could do that probably with time and like little time. I mean, if I had one tooth and was able to spend like a month looking at it and like doing the research, I could do it. But there's just like, I know some people who will like pick up a bone and just be like, yes, this is the whatever, very specific tooth or whatever. And I'm just like, no,
like, teach
you
me.
Can't.
Teach me.
You can't do that. No one can do that. I refuse to believe that.
I felt like early on, I think it was one of our earliest episodes, I remember you mentioning something about wanting to develop like a C14 vision.
Oh, yeah. Gosh, I would love that. I still want it. How have we not progressed that far in our archaeological science and technology?
There you go. Give Alex funding to develop C14 vision.
That's my new postdoc, yeah. But when I mean C14 vision, I mean I want to implant something into my eyeballs so that I can like scan it. Or like I want to look like Cyclops from the X-Men.
It's a look.
It's a look.
So what's your third least favorite?
Well, it's actually very similar because I chose pig teeth in general, all of them, but specifically the molars, because again, I think I've definitely talked about this on the podcast before. Pig teeth are just horrible to look at. They're just so bad to look at. I don't like looking at them. Not boar tusks or anything. Those are cool. But like the molars and the premolars, it's the phrase that I always like to use is it's like you took a human tooth and put it in a microwave and let it pop like popcorn. That's what a pig tooth looks like.
That's without that, taking that imagery aside, what I was going to say is that I thought they looked like popcorn. Just taking
it's horrible.
I don't mind them. I mean, like the M1, M2, like a bit iffy, but then you get that, you know, sometimes in sheep as well, if you don't have a full mandible. Like, is that an M1 or an M2? I mean, third molar, easy peasy.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it also just gives a lot of problems for non-zooarchaeologists, and I don't blame them because they do kind of look like human teeth. And I won't name the institution that I was doing some work at, but this unnamed institution in their archives had a box of allegedly human bone. And when I went to look through it, it was a lot of pig teeth. And again, I don't blame them that they do look like they could look human, but I was just like, wow, this is the worst tooth. Tricking everyone.
I don't mind them. They're okay.
Pig apologists over here.
They're okay. Then if you like want to take measurements off it to determine if it's wild boar, then like that's a discussion for another day. And for someone better prepared.
Anyway, what's your next one?
Rodent bones.
Yeah, that's fair.
Of which you tend to get a lot of.
Yep.
Mostly very fragmented.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, you know, you could go by size, okay, it's rat-sized or it's mouse-sized, but, you know, there's at least, like, 3 species of mouse I can think of off the top of my head. all of which reside in Britain and have done so for millennia.
And there are people who allegedly can tell, based on the bone, what type of rodent it is. Like, not rodent, but like rat.
I mean, like, if it's complete, you can, but again, it's one of those things that you do need reference material. Of course, unless you're very experienced and you go like, oh, yes, wood mouse.
No, they're lying. I've decided.
And the same like with vole, be like, okay, like you can tell, okay, this looks vole-like, but is it a field vole? Is it a bank vole?
Anyone who can do that by eye is too powerful to exist, not only in this field, but on this planet. That's my new hot take.
I can tell you, the one rodent bone, I guess the one notable exception I'll make for it is the delightful pygmy shrew.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's shrew-like, and it's in the name, it's very small. So there's really only one thing it can be. Pygmy shrews are okay. I'll allow it.
Yeah, fair enough.
There you go. What about you?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not really going to go that specific with this because my next worst bone is all ribs and vertebra of all species and any species. And I include human into that as well.
I mean, I was going to put that down myself, but you beat me to it. Ribs are just there to cause a nuisance.
Listen, I will give myself credit in that there are some species that I can at least be like, oh, I know what that rib is. Like pig ribs, I feel like are very characteristic. Seal ribs, I also find very easy to find. Everyone else, I'm like, I have no idea what that is. I can't tell you where it is either. I mean, specifically for humans, that's like a whole other can of worms. I think, again, I've probably told this on the podcast before, but when I was doing my master's and I took a module in human remains, a lot, you get expected to like lay out a whole skeleton. And I just would literally fall to pieces like the skeleton itself when it came to trying to put the ribs and the vertebra in order. It's just, no. And vertebra, I will admit, slightly easier than ribs, particularly with identifying the species. Again, a lot of species, particularly like, avian species and fish, they all look very different, very particular. And I could also tell you, is it a lumbar? Is it cervical? Is it a thorax vertebra? But after that, I could not tell you the number. I can make it up probably. It's a vertebra, it's a rib. And it ends there.
Yeah, because like the worst of them all being the caudal vertebrae.
Oh, God.
Just no.
It's the worst. No. I just got flashbacks. So many Excel spreadsheets where it just says CDV and then no species. Because I was just like, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. It's a caudal. Oh boy.
Oh,
it's bad.
Could have put like a cheeky medium mammal in there.
But even still, there's, once you get to the end, then it's just like, it could be a very big animal with a very long tail.
Very teeny, like the hashtag the littlest tail.
Ugh. But yeah, so they're on my watch list. So watch out, all ribs and vertebra.
No, but I agree. Like vertebrae, definitely a lot easier than ribs. I mean, you can locate them easily enough, sort of on the vertebral column, sort of where they are. Maybe, okay, going into like C3 or C4. Okay, that will depend. But usually you can locate them all right. You can ID like a good chunk of it to species, but generally a bit belligerent. Ribs, just no.
No, bad. Can't even side them.
Although, like one redeeming feature of ribs is that you do tend to see a lot of butchery marks.
On the other hand, that makes it worse because then I'm like, oh, there's butchery. I could not tell you what species this is.
No, but then you can't tell. But okay, like it's a medium mammal rib, it's got a chop mark. You're like, oh, I like it now. So how they've portioned this little joint of meat and that, like I like finding butchery.
Yeah, I guess.
Especially the ones where you get some of the chop marks where they were trying to chop something and they missed so many times. So you just have
to be fair, that is quite fun because it's just like, oh, wow, I existed back in the day. My inability to do anything right when it comes to cooking. It's just me. My like reincarnation back then, just completely missing the mark constantly.
Yeah.
Shout out.
So there you go. That's a reading feature of ribs. And for my top least favourite of all bones are cranial fragments.
Yes.
Now, skulls. Complete skulls, which again, very rare to come by under archaeological conditions. You may have most of a skull in one piece at a push. That's all nice and good. They're lovely. They're aesthetically pleasing. They're easy to identify. You know, that's fine. A lot of what you get are small little cranial fragments where literally all you can tell is that those are bits of a cranium of a critter of some description. And it's usually not isolated. You don't get 1 or 2 cranial fragments. No, you get 250.
Oof. Yeah.
All in one pack.
Yeah.
And it's all sharp, no. And you just... You're like... I mean, because the problem is because it's so fragmented. Like, okay, it's likely it's all from the same cranium, but really, you can't say that. It could be 4 craniums in there, for all you know. Do you know what I mean?
The only thing worse than fragmented cranial bone is fragmented, partially cremated cranial bones. And then that's when I just start crying and just go, maybe this field isn't for me. Maybe I should become a lawyer or something because it bad. And again, I know there's people out there who are able to be like, oh, but this is the parietal bone thing, whatever. And I'm just like, no, it's just look like flat bone.
I thought you were going to say there are people out there that were doing zoo archaeology and then had like cranial bone fragments and went, no, I'm not doing this. I'm becoming a lawyer.
I mean, they probably exist too, because it's just, I completely fall apart with cranial bone fragments. And to be fair, I think for the most part, people are understandably forgiving if you're just like, I can't ID this to species. I can tell you it's cranial. But other than that, it's just whatever. But, you know, it gets annoying when there's so much of it. And you know that, like, it's probably, especially like, there's definitely been times where I've had cranial fragments and then like a couple different species represented in like mandible fragments. And I'm just like, could be one of these, could be all of these. And obviously for like work that I've done, it's important to kind of be specific because of, funerary deposits and things like that. And everything having some kind of meaning as to, are they removing this part of the cranium, putting it somewhere else and whatever. So
it can also be none of the above.
Yeah, it also can just be nothing.
You can have a sheep mandible, a dog mandible, and the cranial fragments are actually from a cow.
Cursed bone. Hate it.
So what have you got for us?
Well, I decided to kind of, change it up and do something different, something that no one's ever heard me talk about before, or something that people wouldn't really expect me to say. So my worst animal bone is fish, all bones, all species, all the time.
This
Shocking.
is brand new information.
Shocking. Now, of course, if you want to hear my detailed thoughts about fish bones, you could, I don't know, listen to the last 50 episodes of this podcast. I believe I've probably talked about it in every single episode. But just a refresher, they're fragile. They're annoying. They're small sometimes.
Do we have a whole episode of fish? We do.
I think we might. Yeah, I think we do. And we were both very annoyed the whole time because we don't want to talk about it.
No. And even more annoyed when we found out it was the episode of our 1-year anniversary of the podcast.
Oh, no. I forgot. That's so cursed. We're so bad with knowing our anniversaries.
Just to keep that self-loathing going.
Oh, gosh. That's awful. That's horrible. But yeah, I don't think there's really much more I need to say about how much I hate fish. They're just bad, folks. They're real bad. Sorry.
They're annoying. And yeah, if you know fish and you're good at fish, teach me.
Yeah, you're like a mutant. You're like a superhero with very cursed skills. I'm sorry. It's weird. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just weird.
Again, is another one of those things where you need extensive sort of reference to work off, and even then,
Yeah.
it's a skill. It's like a sub-discipline in its own right within zooarchaeology.
Yeah. Anyway, shout out to the University of Nottingham for having that amazing fishbone reference.
Oh, yes,
which,
thank you.
if it wasn't for that, I would not have finished my master's dissertation. But I think we can get off this kind of negativity, take a break, and come back with our top 5 animal bones.
Woohoo.
And we are back with ArchaeoAnimals. We're talking about our favorite and least favorite animal bones to celebrate 50 episodes of this podcast, which is still completely wild to me. But hey, normally this would be case study time, but because that time of the episode is always so special and amazing and wonderful, we're instead going to talk about our top 5 animal bones.
And I guess in a way, like, this whole episode has been a case study of us.
Just being bad at zooarchaeology. I think just not being the people who should be hosting this podcast.
I am sure most people in our field have their least favourite animal bones. And actually, if there's anyone out there listening, please tell us what your favourite and least favourite animal bones are. Give us your hot takes.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. There was a few hot takes right there. I think her bastard would just say that her least favourite bones are... No, she said that she was going to say dog bones, but actually it's good because if they're bones, they can't bother her.
That's fair.
Sorry, she's just grumpy at her dog sister, as she tends to be. For our favourite animal bones, so we're now on to number 6.
5.
5! I can count. Sorry, I got lost in the intricacy of the made-up personas I've made for my domestic animals.
Right.
So my number 5 favourite animal bone are metapodials. Again, any species, mammalian, obs. But any species is fine, and they tend to be, like, very easily recognizable, especially when it comes to ungulates, so like sort of cattle and horse in particular, sort of like, again, you can't miss it. I like how dense they are, so they preserve quite well. The distal end is my particular favourite, with my professional description of it as the roly bits.
Yes. They are.
So I just really like metapodials, and again, usually, like, you can tell if it's a metacarpal or a metatarsal easily enough. Again, tends to be easier with cattle, sheep, deer, and horse. But if you got enough of it, like, it's a fairly both easy and aesthetically pleasing bone to work with. Yeah,
I agree, and I do I do like the roly bits, and it's exactly how I think about them too.
Well, because I guess it's all about sort of the articulation they're meant to slot in, so they roll.
Listen, at this podcast, we're all about precision when it comes to our terminology. I will admit, I did not really put any chunky toes in this, and I realized that right before we started recording, and for that, I apologize. I'm sorry to let all my fans down.
The distinct lack of chunky bits.
Yeah. So in a way, my selection for my number 5 is actually a bit opposite of chunky toes, because it's a skull, and it's a you might want to cover Bastard's ears. It's a cat skull, because I know, but they are so cute. They're so tiny, and I don't know. It's one of those skulls that I feel like really captures how small the animal is, which is a very silly thing to say, as obviously you look at the skull and you kind of get an idea of how big the animal is. There's just something about the cat skulls that are just so, like, characteristic of what cats are like in flesh.
Well, so like dainty but deadly.
Yeah, because you see, like, how dainty, like, the top part of their skull is and everything, but then you see their little teeth and you're like, ooh, they can get me. And, it's just, they're very cute. I like them a lot.
I'd like you to know that Bastard has turned her back on the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, meanwhile, my cat, Violet, hates other cats, so she loves cat skulls, I think.
But she's still purring, so you're not in too much trouble.
Okay, good.
But then again, she spends her life purring, so things. And for number 4, I have a skull of my own. Well, not my own personal. It's badger skull specifically, so the European badger Melis.
I get that. Yeah.
And now, aside from it being, well, I guess not quite like the cat, because it is quite a bit chunkier, and the teeth are a fair bit chunkier, and you think like, oh yeah, that would hurt. But my favourite part of the badger skull specifically is the sagittal crest in male badgers.
Yes.
Because now, for reference, for those who are not aware, so you tend to see that in carnivores more. So like you tend to have a sagittal crest. So it's in the word. It's a little crest that's at the top of the skull. And that tends to be more pronounced in males as opposed to females. And now that goes to some extreme in European badger skulls, where like if you look up a photo of like a male badger skull, like they look like they have mohawks.
They do, yeah.
And I love it.
That's actually really cute.
Have you ever thought how like many like small fragments of sagittal crests may have been mistaken for scapula?
No, now you ruined it. Now it's not fun anymore. It's not good. That's giving me anxiety. Well, to counteract that, I'm going to talk about my number 4, which is a bone that's probably a bit more difficult to identify as anything else, and it's the seal tibia. Now, we already kind of talked about tibia with your pick, Simona, in the first half of this show, but I do like the seal tibia because, as I said before, seal bones have a very distinctive curviness to them, but also because they are marine mammals, the bones themselves have a very like porous type of texture to them, which is also very identifiable right away, but I also find very interesting to look at. And, you know, the seal tibia is a really interesting contrast between that kind of curviness as well as that general tibia, like triangular look. It's a land of contrasts, the seal tibia.
Yes. Okay, so I guess we're in the top 3 now.
Oh, yeah, wow.
Okay, so we have, number 3. For me, again, very, very broad, apologies, but carnivore teeth. Because now, in general, I love all teeth. Of course, it's because I find them aesthetically pleasing. They're quite dense, so they preserve very well. They're fairly easy to identify. Of course, you can do, if you get more, like a few teeth and a mandible, because you can age the animal, you can do a lot of fun stuff with it. There can be some cool pathology, but my favourite of all are carnivore teeth, for no other reason other than they're pointy.
Yeah, I get that.
So I like a nice big, like, dog canine.
Mm.
My favourite ones will have to, however, be carnassials, which are the teeth, I guess, depending on whether they're mandibular or maxillary, it's either the 4th premolar or the 1st molar. I think it's the lower 1st molar and the upper 4th premolar. And it's just because they're just so distinctive. And they have all these like pointy cusps. And I think I particularly like the cat one because, again, it's so distinctive. It's just got the 2, it's like V-shaped with the 2 cusps. And can't miss that one. I mean, Bastard can because she doesn't have any of them left.
Oh,
you didn't hear that. You didn't.
I'm looking at. So again, if you're not following me on social media, I've got loads of animal bone tattoos, but in particular, I have 2 mandible tattoos, one of a lower mandible of a cat and one of a lower mandible of a dog. And you can see those carnassials really well. They are very distinctive, and they're like little, I always think of them as waves, little wave shapes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I guess the seal teeth would be quite cool as well, because of course they're carnivore-like teeth because they're specifically adapted for a fish diet. Mm-hmm. So they're like multi-cusps, so they're all like just like a little wavy zigzag. I like them. I
Yeah,
forgot
well,
about seal teeth.
seals are the dogs of the sea, and I've definitely seen a couple times people who have mistaken seal mandibles for potentially like canine, like wolf or dog, which is very easy to do. So definitely kind of pretty similar.
And again, unless you work in a coastal area, like your mind isn't going to go to seal.
For sure, yeah.
You find something like in the dead center of the country, be like, oh yes, seal. If it is though, very cool.
Yeah, and I guess I'm going to kind of go chunky, but not completely chunky toes, unfortunately. Again, sorry. But my number 3, had to think about what number that was, is the cow humerus. Because it is very chunky and distinctively so. And like I said, I kind of love a humerus. That curviness of, the distal end's very aesthetically pleasing. But there's something about a cow humerus that's just so chunky and stubby and fat that I love. And again, very distinctive.
Hashtag chunky arms.
Chunky arms, hashtag.
Arms? Chunky front leg?
Yes, they're not really arms, is it?
And I guess it kind of has a roly bit of its own because of how it goes to articulate onto the ulna and radius. So
yeah, they're cool. They're just big, and I feel like you could really use them as a weapon if need be. Just saying.
The horse one would be quite chunky as well, because I think the distal end is even like chunkier all the way across, like the roly bit.
Yeah, true. I haven't really thought about that. I guess maybe I would just come across cow humeri a bit more in like domestic contexts, but
Number 2. I guess it counts.
it does. I think it does.
It does. I'm going for antler. Again, probably not if you get a small fragment, probably not the easiest to identify to species. I mean, you can roughly like judge it by size. And if you forget about the fallow deer that you don't tend to see as much, aside from specific time periods anyway, be like, I can identify it. But again, I personally like it because I think antler looks really cool. You also tend to see a lot of butchery and a lot of working on antler. So it's always very exciting, and also it implies not necessarily hunting, but at least that people are utilizing wild fauna.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they've hunted the animal, because for all you know, they might have just collected shed antler, and in a lot of the case, like that is indeed the case. But it's still pretty cool, because it's something that deviates from your usual sort of common domesticates, and you go, okay, you got your sheep and your cow. Oh, and red deer. That's cool.
Yeah, I feel like for the most part, if you find antler, there's usually something somewhat interesting going on. Obviously, antler sheds exist and things like that. But, I mean, even, if you're not talking about ritual or anything, plenty of people were able to use antler to work it into tools and things like that. So I feel like in particular, if you're looking at it in a context that has human activity, there's definitely something interesting going on.
Although the downside of that I find personally is wastage. So some of the antler that gets sawn and discarded, you could have made so many beautiful things with that, and you just chucked it in a pit. Unbelievable.
I can't wait until the time travel exists and the first thing you do is go back in time and start berating people of the past for not utilizing all of the antler.
Just tell them off for being wasteful.
Everyone else doing exciting, incredible things, and where'd Simona go? And you're just waggling your finger. That some people have no idea what you're talking about.
Like, you're throwing all these things you could have used. We learnt it from you.
Oh my god.
Here you go.
Well, I guess my number 2 pick isn't necessarily as interesting. And again, it may be surprising for how I feel about a lot of other bird bone. But I chose the bird tibiotarsus, which I guess is like the opposite of your choice from earlier, in that, well, not really the opposite. It's similar in that it's another kind of bone that's a combination of, bones that would normally be separate in other animals.
Yeah.
But
it's one up, I guess, from the one I've mentioned.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. But again, it's the rolly bits. It's the bit at the end is like a little, like, perfect. It looks like the bottom of like a scroll.
Oh, it does.
Which I think that's so delightful. And it's so distinct. And I mean, again, I think I've told this story in the podcast, but one of my most proud moments in my PhD was when I was given a bone that was like, oh, this is a human bone we found from site. And I like looked at it within like 30 seconds. I was like, that's a bird, because it was a tibiotarsus. And to be fair, it was a very big one. It turned out to be crane. It's like a foot long, and it wasn't even a complete tibiotarsus. So I can understand why, you weren't trained in zooarchaeology thinking, oh, that's a human bone because it's so big. But it was just like, it's so cool. And it made me very happy to be able to say that.
Okay, shall we get our drum rolls in for number 1?
Yeah, will that be extremely annoying to have on audio?
See, I'm trying to drum roll on Basti, but again, it's not carrying. She's just purring. The drum roll can be her purring. There you go. And the number 1 is, for both of us,
Yes.
the Astragalus.
Surprise, surprise!
That's where the clap, all the applause starts. There you go.
Yeah, should we wait like 5 minutes for the applause of our listeners to die down? I assume they're giving us standing ovations. So we'll give you a couple seconds to, sit back down, thank you so much. We don't have much time. We gotta keep going with the podcast. Sorry guys, but thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you. No, please don't start another round of applause. It's fine. Please sit down. Please. We need to finish this episode. Okay, I think we're sorted.
Oof. Right.
Yes. Although, to be fair, I said Astragalus of any species, but you wrote especially a specific species.
Yes, especially the bovidae, mostly cattle and sheep, because they look like little toy cars.
And that's our favorite. We just talk about it all the time. They're little toy cars. They're so adorable.
And again, they're pretty. They're very dense, so they preserve very well, usually intact. While you don't necessarily see that sort in the everyday archaeological record, from an ethnographic point of view, there's a lot of very interesting sort of customs and folklore associated with astragali. Mm-hmm. Whether you have some that in some cultures are kept as talismans, or some that are used for divination purposes. I think sometimes different species are used to predict the future, of something, whether it's a sort of people or the chieftain, or and they'll use a different set of astragalae from a different species. And archaeologically, from an ID point of view, aesthetic point of view, ethnographic point of view, just very aesthetically pleasing and fascinating.
Yeah, I think that hits all of the kind of key points that we've made in terms of our favorite bones. Aesthetically pleasing, easy ID, so makes our lives easier, and just interesting in a broader sense. And I think that's a great way to wrap up our 50th episode celebration. And thanks to everyone who's been listening this long, who may have just joined us and are really confused about all the weird jokes that we've made this entire episode. Go back and you can listen to more. And you can find all of our episodes either on the Archaeology Podcast Network website. You can find them anywhere you get your podcasts. If you are getting them from a platform, feel free to, follow our podcast, leave a review. We always love that. We are on Twitter at ArchaeoAnimals. Like we said, let us know what your favorite and least favorite animal bones are. And I think that's it. Anything else?
Yeah, so thank you for listening, and see you. Hear you next time.
Yeah, see you in the next 50 episodes, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to ArchaeoAnimals. Please subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. You can find us on Twitter at ArchaeoAnimals. Also, the views expressed on the podcast are those of ourselves, the hosts and guests, and do not necessarily represent those of our institution, employers, and the Archaeology Podcast Network. Thanks for listening.
This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Laura Johnson.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.